All right, we're going to look at a little bit now of some practical application of the black and white thing. I'm going to go ahead and open up Demo 02, this red building in Rome. Again, F for full screen. And this is a real picture, unlike that previous one, and it also has some strong colors, some red, some green, some blues. I'm going to be walking through, again, our handout here. Follow along. There we go. And sort of see the implications of what we were looking at in that other demo with a real picture. So black and white cookie, let's go ahead and make a black and white layer. Boom, there we go. Pretty straightforward. I am going to oops, come back here. I'm going to set all these sliders to 0. Now, you don't really need to do that when you're working on your own files or whatever. I'm doing this in the demo so that I can be like more sure with what I'm adjusting, that like we can sort of see how much of an impact it has. In general, like, do I go through and zero this out? No, I don't. Like, whatever the starting point is from Photoshop, I accept that, and then I edit from there. But let's take a look at this. So, same as before, if I drag those reds up and down, right, we remember that building, mostly red-looking colors, and they go up and down as we drag the red slider. Perfectly acceptable. Something that is sort of important or interesting here, if we think about the greens, so if I look here at the lawn or the weeds or whatever they are, I think of those as being pretty green. So if I click the black and white back on and I grab the green slider, you can see there's a little bit of a change, but not a whole heck of a lot. And that's sort of a characteristic that we run into a lot, or I run into a lot, with green stuff, right? I think of it as being green, but if I come up here and grab the dragging finger of destiny or whatever it is, click on some grass, drag it over, you'll see that the slider that moves is yellow. So even though I sort of see it as green, the actual RGB values that it's made up of, it ends up being more in the yellow area that Photoshop is looking at. You'll also notice that if I click it off, right, everything around it is also like more explicitly yellow. So as I drag that up and down, right, not only does the grass get yellower, but also so does this sort of gravel around it. Same thing up here. I grab these trees, right, they are more yellow than anything else. So put that out there just as a cautionary note. You'll notice we get kind of an interesting like infrared effect as I drag those reds up and yellows up. But I'm not going to worry about that too much. In fact, I'm going to pull those yellows down a little bit. One of the things that we often want to do with the landscape that we're making black and white is that we want our clouds, we have these nice dramatic clouds, they look very dramatic in color because they're sort of offset against that blue. We make them black and white, and now it's just gray against gray, not as exciting. If we were shooting black and white film, God forbid, we would put a filter on there. The filter would block out those blue wavelengths. Those blue wavelengths not making it through would mean that all the blue areas were black, right, because no blue light was making it in. And we would get then a more dramatic pop. Here, we don't have to mess around with any of that garbage. We can just come up here to the blue values and drag them down. And as I do that, right, the sky gets much more dramatic. Clouds pop a lot more. Super cool, whatever. One thing to note, if I zoom right in on an edge, so I'm going to come in here to this urn or whatever it is. So I have this really big blue adjustment, and you'll notice at the edge of it that there is a dark stripe. And if I turn the black and white adjustment layer off, that's not really something that we notice in the color image. So why is it there, right? Because it's a little distracting. If we zoom in a little bit more, right, and I turn that black and white back off, you can see I didn't get rid of chromatic aberration checked when I brought this raw file in. But you can see that along that edge, the boundary between one color and another is not perfect, right? Anytime you have one object and another object in a photograph, they're never going to meet exactly on a line between two sets of pixels. There's always going to be some sort of fuzziness between the two, and that means that there's going to be a mix of color A and color B. That's why when we make it black and white, it brings this blue down and also this partially blue down. Because this is already darker, you end up with this sort of dark stripe. So keep that in mind, right? Keep an eye out for it. Really the solution is just don't make such a ginormous adjustment, right? A minor adjustment, a reasonable adjustment is not going to cause you these troubles. So if you do make a big adjustment because you're like, yeah, it's so cool, go ahead, go in and look at the edges of things. Make sure you don't have any weirdness. If you do have weirdness, just pull that adjustment back a little bit. Okay, so that is our black and white adjustment on this image. Again, right, pretty straightforward, very similar to what we had with the test image, but just to give you a sense of what it looks like in the real world and a little bit of the pitfalls of making a really big adjustment. And also the blue clouds pop thing. It's just cool. All right, so I'm going to hop out of this and we're going to go on to take a look at a black and white conversion on a portrait image and see what some of the pitfalls are that we might run into doing that work. Cool. We're going to go ahead and take a look at doing a little bit of black and white conversion on a portrait image and see some of the pitfalls with that. I have this Demo 03 zombie black and white headshot. I'm going to drag it into Photoshop here. I'm dragging it into Photoshop because I just double-clicked on it 5 seconds ago before I redid this video and discovered that my laptop is set up to open raw files and capture one. Not what I want. So here it is. Looks beautiful. Go ahead and hit open. All right, you may recognize this woman from previous things. So let's go ahead and standard issue thing. If we were proper people, we would set up our layers here to, which I didn't do in the last clip, so mea culpa, main and original. Drag that down there, turn it off, go back to main. Now let's go up here and make that black and white layer. Great. So with an image like this, we have all the same adjustments that we have with any other kind of image, right? Photoshop doesn't care what it is, it's just a photograph. But I bring it up because there are a couple of things that you want to kind of keep in mind if you go in here and start messing around. Now, this image, other than like Caucasian skin tone, doesn't really have a whole heck of a lot of color. If I turn that black and white off, right, I've got some red lipstick, I've got some what I sort of conceptually read as blue eyes, but they're really kind of grayish if I look at them as like RGB values, and then everything else is like white, gray, whatever. But in this black and white thing, I still have some things I can adjust, right? Can I make the eyes do anything? No, not really, right? They're not really a color, right? They are really mostly just a gray that we sort of read as being a color. I'm going to come down here and hit undo. I could try the dragging finger and see if that's going to do anything. Right? No, it's not. What I do mostly have is skin tone, right? And I mention this not because I think that you're going to want to do this, although I think maybe I make you do it in the homework. I mention this in case you have a black and white image with a person in it where there is something else that is a red or an orange or a yellow, and you want to try and adjust that, right? If you do that, you need to make sure you go back in and pay attention to your skin tones. Because if I drag this red up a little bit, right, the skin tone's lighter, that is helpful in some ways, right? As the skin tone gets lighter, it gets less contrasty, and I sort of lose some of that texture, but looks a little goofy even for this white lady. As I drag it down, right, you'll notice that it really accentuates the bejesus out of any blemishes. Right? Because how do blemishes show up, especially in lighter skin tones? They show up as concentrated areas of a slightly redder texture. As we bring this down, we're going to see them more and more and more. So as you're working on a black and white portrait, if you feel the need to start doing any adjustments in these things, really be careful if you start to pull any of those reds or yellows. They're going to be a landmine as far as causing you troubles later on. That's really it for the portrait black and white conversion. I'm going to jump off that. I'm going to jump back on, and we're going to look at doing some black and white adjustment layers with some layer masking, bringing our brushwork back in that we looked at a little bit at the beginning of the class. And yeah, do some wedding photography kind of stuff.